filling in for a very sick Cynthia Mulligan, our political specialist at CityNews.
And I'm Royson James, Municipal Affairs columnist with the Toronto Star. And tonight, as our title suggests, Mayor John Tory has consented to spend an hour with you and to take your questions. Mayor Tory, why don't you introduce your friends from City Council?
Well, as I said to you, Royson, before the show began, and I'll tell the viewers at home, when you're in this job, I'm not sure you have any friends left, but I do have some colleagues who are here, and I'm very glad they're here, and I hope they're friends too. Councillor Jay Robinson, who represents the area in which we're sitting this evening here at Lawrence and Bayview, Deputy Mayor Denzel Menon Wong, and Councillor Shelley Carroll, who are both North York members of City Council, and we sit here in North York tonight. I should mention as well that we're just delighted that the newly elected Member of Parliament, Rob Oliphant, is also here. He is no stranger because he's previously represented Don Valley West and does once again. And we're also sitting right here in Don Valley West. So those are my friends that are here tonight, with perhaps more to come, and I'll introduce them if they show up.
Exactly, as we see them come in, right? So we're here, as the mayor mentioned, on Bayview, just south of Lawrence, at the Lawrence Park Community Church. A lot of residents have come here tonight to ask the mayor questions in person, but if you're not here, you can always still send in your questions. You can either tweet us using the hashtag AskMayorTory, or you can phone in and you can call 1-800-968-1036.
So let's get the ball rolling, Mayor Tory, on the Syrian refugee issue. Now, your response to this from day one reflects mine. This is Toronto. I mean, something like this is happening in the world. This is a humanitarian, ideally Toronto response to this global crisis. And what I heard today, though, from one of your councillors, Rob Ford, was that, we can't afford this. This is not the time. It's too rushed, too hurried. We have our own problems. Do you think your view reflects the majority of Torontonians, or is Rob Ford?
Well, I'm not going to focus myself, and I hope Mr. Ford is getting better. I know he's not been feeling well, and we all hope he gets better. I'm not going to focus too much on his statement, except to say this would be the same Rob Ford who, when he was running for mayor in 2010, said we should stop immigration to Toronto. And I remember people asked him at the time, I wasn't a candidate, well, how would you plan to do that in a country where we, prize freedom of mobility? And he didn't really have any answer to that. And he said at the time we couldn't take any more people and we were full up and all this kind of thing. This city has been built, and this country has been built on two things when it comes to people who've come here. One is immigration, and the other is, as part of that, a willingness to take people who are in trouble, fleeing persecution or fleeing unbelievably atrocious circumstances, and who come here to Canada. They are selected with care, they are integrated with care and with compassion. And if you look back, I'll name two of the communities that are presently, one of them very actively in this area that we're in tonight. One is the Vietnamese community. We took in, as a country, tens of thousands of Vietnamese refugees. In this city, we took in thousands of Vietnamese refugees. Today, when you visit with that community, they are among the most successful, settled, contributing Canadian citizens you could find. They own businesses, they employ other Canadians, they have children that are doing well in college and are going to be leaders in our community, and so on and so on. The second community I would mention is the Ishmaeli community, who fled Uganda at a time when they were being persecuted, and they are among our most contributing citizens. Not that it's any competition. I think everybody makes a contribution. So I could go on. And so I think that the question really to put back to people like Mr. Ford are, how can we not do anything about this as people who are so blessed to live in a country and in a city that is so wealthy and so peaceful, relatively speaking, to these traumatic places in the world? All I have also said from the beginning was, and I was very heartened to see that the federal government, having thought this through, said much the same thing themselves today, is let's make sure we do it right. I said that I wouldn't criticize one word, I wouldn't issue one word of criticism if they took longer to do this, because it was going to take longer to make the arrangements to house people properly and so on, recognizing there's an urgency to getting these people out of these camps where they've sometimes been for years and to Canada, those who are going to come. And I see today they've said they're going to take a period of time that might stretch into the new year, and I'd say good on them for doing something that was sensible, as opposed to saying, well, we had a political promise we made, for right or for wrong, and then we have to keep that and just say we're doing that. So to me, this is the Canadian way of doing things. We will be sitting here 10 years from now. I won't be. I assure you I will not be the mayor, because if I serve more than 2 terms, I'll be divorced. But having said that, somebody will be sitting here saying, how lucky we were that these Syrian people came to Canada, that we integrated them properly, and that they're making a big contribution to our city in 2025. And so,
now, there was some concern, and there is some concern right now, that the influx of refugees may have a strain on city resources. But in your statement this afternoon, you did mention that wait lists when it comes to childcare and things like housing, you can reassure Torontonians that those wait lists will not get any longer.
No, I mean, we're going to have to reach out, as people are doing now, to the private sector, to nonprofit organizations, to individual Canadians. I mean, again, it's worthy of note that the majority of the refugees who will be admitted to Canada by the end of the year are actually privately sponsored refugees, in which case the housing arrangements and help with employment and so on will by and large be provided by a lot of church groups and other nonprofit groups and by individuals. I have sponsored with my family an entire Syrian family to come. We started off just making a contribution, and now we're up to a whole family, and I'm excited about that, and I'm excited about helping them find a place to live and all those kinds of things. But I think that, we're going to have to reach out and make an extraordinary effort to get help from people who are in the housing business and others, but it will not affect anybody here who is looking for that kind of help on a list that they may be on. We're going to deal with it separately, and we have the capacity to do that. We have the wealth, we have the ingenuity, we have the volunteerism to deal with it. I'm not worried that we, subject to this reasonable timing and reasonable numbers, will be able to deal with this. We have before.
Are you getting any type of financial assistance from the federal government, and how much?
We don't know yet, and I think the federal government today announced as part of their program about, I think, $600 and some odd million spread across the country. And if you look at the Ontario numbers, where they've said, Premier Wynne has said that Ontario would take about 10,000. If you looked at the mathematics and said, well, that would mean we'd probably have, say, 2,500 in Toronto. I would assume that the money both dedicated by the federal government, 600 and some odd million, the provincial government has said 10 million, that will, some portion of that will come to Toronto to assist us in the efforts we will make. And when I say us, I don't mean necessarily the city government, but I mean agencies in the city, others who help provide housing and other forms of support for the refugees. And so the answer to your question is yes, there will be money. And you know, again, I'm not trying to slough this off. The city has a very active program that we started quite some time ago with the leadership of Councillor Joe Cressy and Councillor Joe Mihevik and others, and myself, and our staff, to prepare to coordinate, which is what the city government, as you both know very well, does more so than actually being involved, say, in the selection of or immigration of refugees. We're going to help make sure that their integration is as seamless as it can be, coordinating agencies and others who do these things on the ground in the city. And the money will help with that. But yes, I'm fully expecting that that money is going to come, some of us, to us or to the work that we're doing with these agencies.
Now, speaking about coordination, a couple of months ago, you did meet with several church leaders throughout the city to talk about how to integrate refugees, talking about starting websites where doctors can put their names on a list, or coordinating donations of clothing and furniture, that kind of thing. Where does that stand right now, especially now that we know this influx is coming? The
response has been overwhelming, and I would say to the people who are watching, thank you for doing what I knew Torontonians would do. When I first stepped up and talked about this, I went to the launch of Lifeline Syria back in, I think, February or March, before it was even a topic that was getting as much attention in the news, because I thought it was the right thing for us to do. But the response has been overwhelming, both in terms of sponsorships, doctors, clothing, as you say. The latest, I got informed the other day, and I just mentioned this to the viewers and to the people in the room here, a lot of these kids have been in these camps for 2 or 3 years, and they haven't seen a dentist. And I think we all know what happens to the kids that don't see the dentist and that don't look after their teeth properly, and that do eat things that kids eat. And so they're going to be in need of dental care. We've already been informed of that. And so we're going to be looking for a way in which we can coordinate the volunteerism of dentists. And if they're anything like doctors and others who are asked to help, the response has been overwhelming. And the challenge is to coordinate all of that. And make sure that you can then put that volunteerism and those resources to work for these people when they arrive here in Canada. Okay. We're going to move on to the TTC hike. Oh, yeah. So yesterday, we know that cash fares went up 25 cents, bringing them up to $3.25 now. Tokens are going to go up 10 cents each as well. For people who are riding the TTC every day and who think, oh, is this your...
Yeah, I'm giving him more money.
Your contribution?
Yeah. Costing more and more to buy...
Certainly a very full wallet you have there, Royson. I will comment on that.
You remember when it was, what, 6 tokens for $1? Anybody remember that? Okay, yeah. So you keep taking more and more out of my wallet here, Mr. Mayor.
So a lot of people feel the same way. Can we, a day later now, explain why?
Well, let me start with the fact that the simplest of facts that goes with this, and I think most people in this room and most people watching understand that the costs of the TTC, just like every other organization that is employing people, buying huge quantities of electricity to run the streetcars and subways, buying huge quantities of diesel fuel, maintaining buses, employing people, did I mention that? The cost of that goes up. You know, it's subject to inflation like every other organization is. And so that's point one. I mean, the costs have gone up. Secondly, the cash fare, which you mentioned, which is going up 25 cents, has not been adjusted for the better part of a decade. And quite frankly, we're trying to get people to begin to move away from using the cash fare as we introduce the Presto card, which will be fully introduced into the system by a year from now, because the handling of cash is hopefully not going to be a feature of the TTC anymore. If you can imagine how expensive it is for the TTC to deal with the cash, taking it at the windows, having trucks go around to collect huge quantities of cash. These trucks, they literally have to be reinforced in the way they're structured because the cash is so heavy with all these loonies and toonies and quarters and whatnot. So we're getting people away from a cash fare, but it hadn't been adjusted. We did freeze, the TTC board approved a recommendation which now forms part of the sort of budget process to freeze the cost of a Metro Pass, because Metro Passes have gone up quite a bit in the last number of years. And then, but to adjust the price of tokens by 10 cents on a ride that is still subsidized by the rest of the taxpayers. So the final point I'll make is this. I think it is fair for people to expect when they're being asked to pay more, even if it's just to pay more for the effects of inflation, that service should be getting better. We invested $100 million last year, one of the biggest investments in the history of the TTC aside from construction, in improved service. Quite frankly, not that I want to mention his name too many times tonight, but Mr. Ford, when he was mayor, he thought the way to constrain expenditure in the city was to cut bus routes that were the lifeline connecting neighborhoods in the city together and connecting people to jobs. We restored many of those. We bought 50 new buses to add express bus route services. We added trains to the subway station. We gave transit to children 12 and under for free to help families that are struggling in our city, because one of their big costs they have if they want to take their kids anywhere is transit. And now those kids, and I've had many families come to me since we did that a year ago and tell me it made a difference in their lives. And so that when you do those kinds of things, obviously that both improves the range of services and the availability of service to people, and there's a cost to that. And so somebody asked me today in the media, well, would I look at the possibility of saying, well, maybe we'll have to cut back on some of those services? I said, look, I don't know whether I look dumb. I hope not. But I mean, the bottom line is you don't go about investing $100 million in restoring services and improving services and adding services that you think are needed in a big city and then turn around the next year and cut them back. You know, that makes no sense. So this is what I would describe as a modest fare increase. It is consistent with the inflationary pressures the TTC faces, and we left the Metro Pass, which is our most frequent customers, as is. That's the recommendation.
Now, I know that there may be some TTC fare hike questions in the audience. We're going to go next to the podium there. You can have a question about whatever you'd like, though. It doesn't have to be about the TTC. Go ahead.
It's not about the TTC. Thank you for coming to this community church. Thank you for mentioning that many Christian groups have sponsored Syrian families. My question is about a permit in the Dundas Square downtown. There was a multi-denominational Christian group that for the past 5 years has had a musical event with performances and so on, and it is multi-Christian groups coming together, and they've done that for 5 years. And this year, when they went to get the permit, I gather the woman who issues the permits, Natalie Bellman, refused it, saying they're proselytizing. I like to think that's not going to happen. I just ask you.
I'm so interested because the issue has been written up in the newspaper for about a week, and I make myself available to the media pretty well every day of the week, and nobody's ever asked me before. And I will tell you that I respectfully disagree with her decision, and I'll tell you why. I saw the basis upon which she said that, and there is a city policy that says you're not supposed to make people feel uncomfortable by having kind of what I'll call a hard sell on religion or any other kind of matter in public squares, and I understand that. But in this case, I saw some of the words that were quoted in the newspaper, and here's the analogy that I drew, and I never drew it in the press because no one ever asked me, but I drew it in my own office when I said, well, if I get asked, here's what I'm going to say. when we would never think of not allowing people to have a Christmas carol service at Yonge Dundas Square. And when people are getting up and singing the chorus to, what is it? "O come, let us adore him. O come, all ye faithful. O come, let us adore him." The words were like that. Praise the Lord and, whatever. And I say, well, so fine then. Are we going to ban Christmas carol services too? I think this is a bit of how the world sort of has gone a bit overboard on some of these things. And I would say, look, if the organization understands that our policy is to make sure that while people have the freedom to talk about their spiritual beliefs as they wish, but don't get carried away with it in terms of abusing the use of a public square so that people feel uncomfortable. I don't happen to believe any of the words I saw constituted that. And so I would have said, let them have their meeting. They've had it for a number of years and nobody made a fuss about it. So I think they're up for some other kind of a hearing at some time in the future, and I hope that those people will reconsider and perhaps just say, look, we're counting on you to act responsibly, as I believe the vast majority of Torontonians would do. You're using a public square. Be respectful of others. That's the way we live in this city. So I hope they get their permit, and I hope that people understand that this is no different than a Christmas carol service. Oh, come, let us adore him. Well, nobody was offended by that as far as I know.
Yeah. Praise the Lord.
So are you hoping, or will you actually intervene?
Well, no, it's not. It's the first time I've been asked about it,
right.
and I'm quite happy. I mean, I'm still learning about what's proper for me to call and intervene on and what isn't. And I gather they have some sort of a panel that advises on these things, and there are more rules, as I think you know, about when I could call somebody and when I can't. But I'm quite happy if it's proper for me to call and say, look, this is my view, but it's just my view. I don't, I'm not in a position, I think, as you know, to sort of instruct people to do very much. As the mayor, you can sort of express your view and hope that common sense prevails.
Yeah, you can have a notice of motion before a council. See if your councillors will actually support you on that.
I just don't think these people pose any threat. I really don't.
Okay, I'm just going to remind the audience here, if you do have a question, if we can get you to line up at the back just here, or the floor manager, once we're ready, we'll bring you up to the center, up to the mic. So if you have a question, and I think we do have a question here, you can go ahead.
Hi. I'm a Lawrence Park resident and for many, many years, and my question is about development in our city. And I would observe over the last couple of years, we've seen fabulous investment in the city, which is great for providing housing and so forth. We have an official plan ratified by the OMB. And one of the things that's happened quite recently is the number of applications for amendments to the official plan. And you can name number 2 Wilkett, which is up the road on Bayview. You can name 4951 Weybourne. You can name 200 Keewatin. You can name 41 Chatsworth. These are just ones that are walking distance from here. So there's a number of them, and it's everywhere. And I guess my question revolves around how we manage properly. When we have an official plan, we have the risk, in my view, of a very ad hoc approach because every planner has their own sort of interpretation of the facts and what's okay. So how do we manage that? And then the second level of ad hocism, which we'll gut, or that we're at risk of gutting, our official plan relates to the OMB. And how do we ensure that the OMB members who are not resident here actually take into consideration what the local concerns are? So from my perspective, I guess we have our own internal management problem of how do we run the city and the planning department, who has a very professional staff, and then further, how do we interface with this government body that no other city of our size or caliber in the country is confronted with? Not in Montreal.
The two are very much related to one another,
Yes.
as you know, because if people end up unhappy, but people, most particularly developers, but citizens can use the OMB as well to appeal.
Yes.
Then they go there, and quite often the OMB ends up, I'll use the expression, imposing its decision on the city, and there is no kind of override of that. It just happens. You didn't ask specifically about OMB reform, but I've often said that I think one of the reasons, and I'm being honest about this as a relatively new elected official, that over the years, successive governments of all parties at the province have refused to do away with or otherwise substantially amend the OMB because they don't believe that the politicians, albeit that they're elected, would behave entirely responsibly in terms of how they treat development. I think that's just a statement of fact as to why it hasn't been reformed before now significantly. It just hasn't. With respect to the planning department, I mean, we do have obviously a greater degree of control over that. I'm troubled by the fact, and again, I've been at City Hall for 1 year, but over the years I've had a chance to watch official plans come and go, and it seems almost before the ink dries that people are beginning the process of amending the official plan after taking years to develop it. Now, I will say this, we have to be fair about this. I mean, the development should be compatible with the neighborhoods that it is adjacent to or part of, and so I think that's a key test. So then the question becomes, both on the part of the developers, the planners, and the residents, what's compatible? And I think that too often what happens is we get this kind of black or white choice where the residents would say no development is compatible with what we have here. I mean, I sat years ago at a meeting where somebody, a ratepayers group, said to me at Yonge and Lawrence on the old Toyota dealership where there is today a condo building rising there right on the corner, right at the subway. Don't you agree, Mr. Tory? And I was running for provincial parliament right here at the time, ironically against Kathleen Wynne. I mean, I wasn't running against her, but we were running together for the same seat. I lost. But I said, no, that's exactly where you have to build a condo building because, and you don't have to build it 50 stories, but that's where you have to have some development because it's on a main street 50 feet from the transit, and you have to populate those intersections differently than perhaps they were before as the city grows in population. But when you get into Weybourne Crescent, I'm familiar with where that is, when you get into Keewatin and so on, these are different. And again, I think those are not high-rise building proposals, but they're creating some controversy because they're different than what's there now, which is essentially, as you well know, single-family homes. And so I think that what the chief planner is trying to do is to make sure that what we don't do is end up with no development anywhere except downtown. So the concept of mid-rise buildings, which is going to be something more appropriate, or townhouse developments more appropriate to a single-family home neighborhood, is what they're trying to encourage to go in those places where it's suitable for development at all. And I actually have more confidence in the system than it sounds like you might, based on what is going on now, which I realize is controversial on Weybourne, on Keewatin, and even on Bayview.
Honestly, I feel more confident about the city and much less confident about the OMB.
Over which I would just say, and I'm not trying to pass the buck, we have no control. The city has no control over it. I can tell you there are councillors sitting here who would be as frustrated half the time with what the OMB does as you would be, because it's out of our hands. We don't appoint the people. We have no say in the appointment. We have no say in their rules or their laws or their precedents. That is totally a body of the provincial government. And I think only after several years of increasingly responsible behavior on our part will some government one day, and when I say one day I don't mean 100 years from now, but maybe in a few years, actually agree to reform the OMB to allow us to have a greater role and the OMB to have less of a right to kind of impose their will on a city that has a democratically elected council. But it's not happening for now.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate your question. And again, another reminder to the audience, if you do have a question, if we can get you to line up at the back, and we'll have our floor manager bring you up to the mic. We do have someone who has a question now. You can step up, but for anyone else, if you can line up at the back, the floor manager will bring you up to the mic when it's appropriate. Thanks. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for doing this today. The city recently went through a fiery and divisive debate about removing the link between the DVP and the Gardiner. And presently, we are studying tolling these city-owned and maintained roadways. In light of the fact that we are on the hook for almost $4 billion in rebuilding and maintenance costs coming directly from Toronto property taxes, and that many, if not most, DVP Gardiner users come from outside the city, paying nothing towards the upkeep of these roads, while we here in town pay while generally avoid using these highways because of congestion. Hasn't the time come for fair charging of fees for the use of these expensive express services?
Well, let me just say this. I mean, I've had a historically sort of consistent position of saying that I don't think we should be charging road tolls on roads that we already paid to build. And the Parkway and the Gardiner in their present form obviously constitute two roads like that. As we look at building new roads, brand new roads, obviously the whole reason that you, as you said correctly, there's a study coming back on these tolls. Those are things that are represent a possible source of revenue for those that the City Council will consider when it comes back. I think the premise of your question with respect to sort of, people put it less elegantly than you do, and they say, well, let's nail those 905 people who come down and use our roads. The fact of the matter is, if you look now at the traffic patterns in Toronto, and these are measured, of course, there are almost as many cars going out to the 905 in the morning using the very same highways of 416 people going out to work in the 905 as are coming in. So if we decided we were going to sort of place a toll facility coming in to sort of quote unquote nail those 905ers, I expect their response at some point in time would be to say, fine, we'll simply do it the other way. And I'm not sure we'll be any further ahead in terms of sort of where the residents of Toronto end up. When you have roads, just as when you have transit systems and when you have sewers and when you have streets, there's a cost to maintaining them. And we have to decide, do we want to have it become sort of a much more exclusively user pay kind of environment? There are drivers who would suggest that it's already a user pay and that they pay, and they've been told over the years, the reason you pay a license fee for your sticker on your plate, a driver's license fee for your own personal driver's license, a gasoline tax, what have I forgotten? But there's all these different taxes and charges you pay, as those are meant to charge you for the fact that we are building and maintaining these roads. And so if they're now told, well, there's just one more we have to add to that, which is a toll for the gardener and the DVP, I think there'd be people that have some problem with that and say, we're already paying 3 times, or we're paying once through these 3 different methods. How many more times do you expect us to pay? So it's a tough issue. And I don't know that it does represent the answer. It seems simple. Other people suggest we should impose the tolls not because it'll help pay for the roads, but because it'll cut down on the number of people driving. My response to that has always been that you have to be worried at the same time about the fact that you will divert people off those roads onto residential streets. You should think very carefully, if you live here, about what the traffic impact might be, even of something as far away as the Don Valley Parkway, on streets that run right through this neighborhood, of people who are saying, well, I'm not going to pay that toll, I'm from 905, it doesn't matter where they're from. There are people who will take any steps to avoid paying the toll, and they'll end up driving down Mildenhall and Blythewood and Bayview and Lawrence, and you'll be upset about that because the traffic will be not safe for your children and so on. So it's a complicated subject. I don't think it has a simple answer. I've told you what my historical position has been, and we'll sort of watch the whole thing unfold as all these studies come back and as we embark on these very expensive construction projects.
Thank you very much. We have a tweet that actually just came in from Mark. He asks, when will the mayor remove street parking and left-hand turns along TTC streetcar routes in the core?
Well, we've done quite a lot of that, actually. In fact, they made some adjustments just last week on College and Queen to further restrict some parking and to, in some cases, add in left turn lanes. I mean, they added in lanes so that it didn't, block the traffic when people were turning left, when there were also streetcars present. I did quite a long interview today about cycling. And I said, look, as with everything, the challenge that you face at City Hall, and I'm trying in every decision that I make on every issue to adopt the same approach, which is to try to be balanced about these things. I think the polarization of politics that said things like, well, we can't afford to have any more immigrants here, let's close down immigration. This is not conducive to common sense decision making. And so when you have a balanced transportation system that has to have streetcars move, cars are still on the road driving, bicycles are going along with increasing numbers of people using them. There are pedestrians who have to remain safe. And I've forgotten other things, taxis and trucks and so on. The key is to achieve a balance that makes sure that you keep all of those things moving to a reasonable degree without sort of saying, well, one is going to be sort of completely shut off or punished at the expense of another. And so we're taking steps day by day on different streets to, the parking is now much more restricted than it was, say, 5 years ago on these streets. I've made a particular thing out of making sure those laws are enforced, which is a key. You can have the laws and have the signs, and if nobody enforces them, it's a joke. They are putting in increasing numbers of left turn lanes or left turn prohibitions so the traffic keeps moving. I don't think it's viable to sort of say we're going to get rid of streetcars. We're just in the process of taking acceptance of $1 billion worth. And the notion we're going to turn around and say we're going to get rid of them is not really very sensible at this stage of the game. We're into it. So we have to find ways to have them travel with all the people on them, 60 or 70 people, and make sure that they can share the roadway with the cars and, of course, with bicycles as appropriate, and, of course, make sure pedestrians are safe. And that's the job that we have to do, and we're trying our best.
Well, you're not suggesting that there's a balance now. I mean, on King Street and on Queen Street, the streetcars are the ones that are hobbled by these people making the left turn lanes. And I think what the tweet is suggesting is, why don't you create a throughway so that the streetcar, just ferrying so many people, get the right-of-way.
Yes, and Royson, you're right. I wasn't trying to imply that. What I was saying, though, is we are creating opportunities with left-turn prohibitions and left-turn lanes where there are places we can do that. And there are changes we're making to signals to give transit priority on those signals, and we're allowing things that have nothing to do with the movement of traffic but have to do with the speed of loading and unloading, like rear door loading, which will be available on all streetcars, I think, by the early part of next year, because the Presto card will be available as well. So we're, again, trying to achieve a balance, because there are still cars on King Street and there are still cars on Queen Street. And those streetcars are, the service levels that are there, the service capacity that's there available to people is still inadequate. So we still have a challenge there, but we're taking steps each day through parking prohibitions and various different things to try and improve the situation that you correctly describe as still less than adequate. And so the person tweeting is right. You know, I get various people suggesting we should make them both one-way streets going, you know, different ways, and business has a problem with that, right. Retail business. So that's what I say, no matter what you turn to do in this job, that's why I said I had no friends left. No matter what you turn to do, there's somebody who'll be sort of, you know, disagree with it. And I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying that's a reality. You try to achieve a balance and do the best you can to have the streetcars move with the 70 people on them, but make sure at the same time that the car that might have 2 people in it isn't completely, or the truck that's delivering services to businesses is not sort of in effect precluded from doing its work.
Okay. We have another tweet coming out of the East End now. When can Scarborough expect to see more ice rinks being built? We have one. It's from John.
Yeah, this came up during the election campaign, and I made no promises with respect to that, but I did acknowledge the inequity that had existed historically. I mean, it's something that sort of grew up long before the amalgamation of the city into one. For whatever reason, there were other parts of the city that had many more ice rinks than Scarborough. Now, I remember, depending on how you count ice rinks, indoor, outdoor, artificial, natural, they're not as badly off as some of these tweets will suggest. But there is still a discrepancy.
Yes.
And look, we have some choices to make again. I mean, this is all about what being in government's about, and you're accountable for it because you're up for election, all of us as councillors and myself as the mayor. And in the end, we can spend the money if we want on having more ice rinks in Scarborough, but there's pressure to have more parks everywhere, especially in areas where there's been intensive development without, you know, commensurate parkland. There's pressures to do all kinds of things that even just in the recreational space, community centers. I mean, it takes years now. My 2 council colleagues who are here would know how many years you have to wait to get a community center in your area, years. And so is that more important than an ice rink? I don't know the answer to that question, and that's the balancing act we're trying to perform. I'm aware of the discrepancy in Scarborough, but it's not as big as was suggested by some during the election campaign. There is one, though, and I acknowledge that, and that's something over time, as capital is available, we will have to try to rectify.
Okay. We have a question from the podium, sir. You can go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm sure you're aware as you drive around this neighbourhood, there's a few hundred trees with yellow tape around them which indicate that they are designated in a scheme by the city for felling as part of what seems like an excessive plan to change the character of this area. We've been told, including by our councillor who's here tonight, that this scheme may be under revision by the city and is being scaled back. Could you perhaps share with us tonight what the latest thinking is from the city on this particular scheme? Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. First of all, I should say that, well, the first thing I'll say is that we raised our own children in this neighborhood, and I love the character of the neighborhood as it is, and you'd like things always to stay the same as they've been forever, no matter what you're talking about, but unfortunately life doesn't work that way. A lot of the streets in this area are dramatically in need of repair, to the point where if you don't repair them, there's going to be serious problems. There already is a serious problem. I've seen the map, and I meant to bring it in here so I could hold it up tonight. But there'll be some in here who have experienced it. They don't need to see a map from me. The map that shows the basement flooding that's taken place in Lawrence Park, and it's got different colored dots. Green dot for 1 basement flood, sort of a yellow dot for 2, and a red dot for 3 or more basement floods. And there's dots all over the neighborhood. And we have to deal with that. I mean, those people, you can say, fine, let them claim on their insurance. Well, they've got a problem. We have a problem with these streets falling apart. And we have a challenge. I won't call it a problem, but we have a challenge with streets that I used to walk down to go to public school myself, where there are huge university campuses and private French schools and public schools and so on now that have massive amounts of pedestrian traffic, and there is a question of safety. Now, I recognize the fact, because I'd be on this side, probably if I was here, that you don't want sidewalks on every single street in Lawrence Park, because over the years, there haven't been any sidewalks that's part of the character of the neighborhood. And so and I can tell you that the final thing I'll tell you by way of a fact is that Councillor Jay Robinson has been a relentless presence in my office on this issue, representing your views, representing your concerns, speaking to the officials, having me convene meetings with the officials. All I will tell you is they're working really hard on this. They have literally done things like develop new designs that are on some of these streets such that the road and the curb will actually curve now to go around a tree, so the tree can survive and not have to be threatened by this. In part, they've made some adjustments to how these sewers are going to be put in, the new sewers, because the problem is, in some cases, the sewers have to go right underneath where the roots of the tree are. And there is no way to actually build the sewer, which has to be done, without affecting the roots of the trees. But they're trying to minimize that. And all I can tell you is, I'm not going to get into numbers tonight, but the originally stated number of trees, which I know was high and in the hundreds, has come way down with the work they're doing, but the work's not finished. And so I can just tell you, between this councillor and her, you know, I come in my lobby and I expect to see her sitting there half the time on this issue, and others, but this one too. And the staff who get the message that this neighborhood is unique, and that you try and respect that as much as you can while doing some of the things that have to be done for basement flooding, for pedestrian safety, and so on. I think you'll find that in the end, and the plan has some distance to go, I think it's got to go through an environmental kind of series of discussions and so on. By the time it's done, I would be willing to sort of sit here and I guarantee you it's going to be substantially different and better than what led to the yellow ribbons. And that's why the yellow ribbons are important, because we all got the message. And so it's not going to be, I can't tell you there's not going to be a tree that has to come down. You know, when I was a boy growing up in this neighborhood, the elm trees all got sick, you know, and they had to be taken down. We had one right in our front lawn. It was probably this big around. And it had to be taken down because of illness. And guess what? We planted a new tree there, and you know, it's not ideal, but years later, there's a big new tree there that wasn't there before. And so, but this is going to be minimized. I guarantee you there's people working very hard at that.
All right, thanks very much. Another reminder, if you do have a question here in person, line up and we'll have the floor manager bring you up to the mic. If you do have a question, we're going to go to the phones first, though. We have Rose from Scarborough who's on the line right now. Rose, go ahead.
Hello, Rose.
Yes.
Have you got a question or a comment?
Yes, I do have a question for our mayor.
I'm sitting here ready, willing, and able. I'm not sure I'm able, but I'm ready and willing.
Good evening, and how are you?
No, I didn't hear the question.
I think she said, how are you?
I said good evening, and how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
That's good. I live in Scarborough, and I would like to know, what will you do regarding room renting? You know, the market had been really good. People have been buying houses that on the market and turning it into room renting. And I found in my neighborhood, around me, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 rental properties. 3 in front of my house, 1 on the side. The one on the side was a 3-bedroom house. It's now a 5-bedroom house, excluding the basement. And every 2 weeks, at night, new tenants come in, single women, single men, and then another 3 weeks, I don't see them, I see new tenants. I have cigarette butts thrown over my yard. Their yard have not been, grass had only cut once, overgrown hedges, leaves all over. I tired pick up their trash. And I want to know what you will do. Your bylaw officer said that they do not have enough officers to go around and to do anything. And I want to know, as a property owner, what can I do? Or who can help me to see the safety? It's not only a rooming house. Yes, I agree people need room to rent, but we have bylaws, and bylaws should stay in place. Plus, it's a fire hazard. If that house is not equipped to have 5 rooms to rent 5 different persons at one time, if the ad was
what we'll do is, Rose, we'll let the mayor answer, because I think
1 bathroom, 1 kitchen to service all these people.
Well, Rose, can I thank you very much for that question, and it's not a question that I'm surprised by, because this has been an issue. One of the things that happened at the time of amalgamation was that you brought together the cities, Scarborough, North York, Etobicoke, Toronto, and so on, and you had one city, the City of Toronto, the old City of Toronto, that had a history of allowing and permitting and, in fact, licensing rooming houses, and other municipalities, the old Scarborough and North York and so on, that did not. And that was, in some respects, consistent with the history of those relatively newer so-called suburban neighborhoods. I think I'm right in saying, and I'll just look to my council colleagues for confirmation of this, that there's a report coming from the licensing body this year coming up, 2016. I think it's coming sometime in the winter, and that will provoke a full-scale debate of exactly what you're talking about. There are two sides. When I say there are two sides, there are probably 102 sides to this, but there are two sides to this. One group of people who would argue that it is equitable that if there are to be allowed rooming houses in the City of Toronto, then it should be allowed elsewhere, especially in light of a housing shortage that we have. And the other group of people who would say, look, it's fine that they had that historically in the City of Toronto, but we haven't had that in these other municipalities, and that the law should be enforced that says we don't have rooming houses. And so that debate will ensue this winter. Whether we want to have it or not, it's coming, because there's a report being written about the possible reform to the law. I will just say one more thing in response to your question about enforcement. Obviously, it's like, dare I mention, the sort of Uber and taxi cab thing. There's almost no way you can enforce the law against Uber. I mean, they've laid a couple of hundred charges in the last few weeks, but there's 400,000 people who are using that. There are 15,000 people who are driving. The key is for us to reform the regulations, to modernize them, to reduce the regulatory burden on taxis, and bring Uber under regulation for the first time. With rooming houses, I think the same thing is true. It's going to be virtually impossible for the city, no matter how many bylaw inspectors they have, to stay on top of every instance in which this may be going on in Scarborough where you live. And so, to finish with your final question, the only thing I could advise you to do in response to your question is to call your city councillor, and they in turn can be in touch with the licensing authorities to, we don't instruct them as to what to do, but they can sort of tell them there's an instance on your street, and they can send somebody out to have a look at any breaches of the law that might be taking place. Now, did I answer that adequately, Denzel or Jay, such there's anything you would have to add? Because I know there's a microphone down there if you want to. Anything to add, or Denzel?
If it is an illegal rooming house, someone will come out and inspect it. There are concerns with regard to fire safety and having the proper exits and those type of things. The city it has to make sure that any of these houses are legal and that they're made properly safe for the people that use them.
So I hope you heard the deputy mayor that they can, even if they can't send or don't send, or they send a bylaw enforcement officer, they can also send people to do inspections, and that often will smarten these people up because they'll, as it were, they'll know we're onto them. But there is a big debate coming up this winter about this, and I don't know where that debate's going to go, quite frankly. As I said, I tried to sketch out there are many sides to the issue, but thank you very much for the call, Rose.
All right, thanks very much, Mayor Tory. We're going to go to the podium next, sir. I know you have some diagrams there. I just want to let you know we won't be able to see them on camera, but you can refer to them as you like.
I just have a study that was provided to the residents of the area, and I'm just looking at it during this last call. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mayor Tory, on behalf of a lot of people here tonight for displaying your interest in this area and the beauty of this area and trying to maintain the rural character of this area. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but I felt motivated by a statement about sewers and the need for more infrastructure in terms of sewers. As a civil engineer, I wonder, then I'll make my question, but I wonder just how much this would really alleviate some of the flooding that has been experienced by some of the people in their basements. As you know, there's two forms of sewers. There's a sanitary sewer and there's a storm sewer. And in many parts of Lawrence Park, we don't have the storm sewers. Thankfully, we have what we call swales or ditches, and that gives us our rural character that we appreciate very much. That is actually a very effective way of carrying storm water. I think back to the time when we were asked to fill out the questionnaire, is there any water in your basement? Are you experiencing any? And it was very easy for people to check off that, yes, they have water in their basement, but I think a lot of people don't appreciate how this water appeared in their basement. As far as I can understand, there's only two ways. Either it comes up through the drain, which is connected to the sanitary sewer, not the storm, or it could come down the exterior walls of your house through the window wells. If you have, like in my case, I had quite a bit of water come into my house. I built my house, and I built it incorrectly when it came to putting aggregates around the outside of my house, and I had water actually coming through the window well and into my basement. And no amount of sewers whether storm or sanitary, would alleviate that situation. What I had to do was dig down and put in parge and put more aggregates so that the water would go away. So my question is, has staff actually approached people who filled out these questionnaires saying that, yes, they have water in the basement? Have they approached each one to find out exactly where this water came from? What was the cause of this water? Because if it was done, then maybe we could alleviate some of the need for some of this infrastructure that we're talking about.
I think it's a fair question in the context of saying if somebody's house is improperly built, it has nothing to do, as you say, with sewers. I don't know if Councillor Robinson's in a position to know if we've actually asked. All I know is I did see the map, and I'm not making this up, and I think you've probably seen it too, it may be even part of the papers you have there with all the dots on it, and there's a lot of people in this area that have water in their house. Now, the cause of it, did they investigate that further, Councillor?
Yes, so there's been extensive public consultation on this file, and they have established that the east end of this neighborhood there is a lot of flooding and basement issues, and unfortunately not everybody reports them because of insurance. But the city has a way of tracking it. So the engineers, and the mayor and I are certainly not engineers, I will tell you that, as we plot our way through this issue. But the engineers have determined there is flooding. Unfortunately, a lot of developers have come into this area and developed and filled in the ditches. And so that hasn't helped in that there's not a flow-through effect. So that's unfortunate, and some of the developers have just used up the right-of-way, filled it in, and there's no ditch there anymore. So that's a big problem. But the staff have done a lot of analysis, a detailed analysis, and they're very convinced there's a lot of flood management issues to deal with in the east end of the neighborhood.
I would just say to you again, sir, perhaps just by way of concluding comment on this, that there's been sufficient attention raised to all of these questions about the trees and about the sewers and about the cause of the flooding and so on, that I can just tell you that, there are huge numbers of people, staff and people, elected people, and I think going forward, there's an entire process yet to be unfold that's going to involve the residents again to get. When I say get to the bottom of this, address the question that was asked earlier about the trees, address your question. We don't want to spend any money we don't have to spend. One of the points I made in talking about, because I like the fact there were no sidewalks here. In fact, I jokingly said I'd have paid twice to keep the sidewalks out of here. But, there are also standards now to roads that are built in the 21st century that require, in some cases, there be a curb or a sidewalk for reasons of just protecting your tax dollars, not just the neighborhood, against repairs that will have to be done and all this kind of thing. But the bottom line is all of this is going to be very carefully considered in the months ahead. No construction is starting anytime soon. They're going to plan it out properly, and I think you'll find many of these issues will get resolved because of the consultation that's happening and because of, frankly, meetings like this where these kinds of things are raised. If you don't think now I won't go forward and ask some of the questions you just asked in the meetings I'm in with the officials, you'd be wrong about that. I will, I promise.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your question. We have another question at the podium. If you want to step up here. Thanks very much.
Good evening. Actually, my question is more of a comment, and that is that as hard as you are all working, and I know, John Tory, you've worked for a long time to get to this position, and more than anything, I would just like to say thank you to all of you and to our councillors for trying to do a better job for Toronto, and we appreciate it. That's it. Thank you.
That's a great word. Your thoughts on that, Mayor Tory? That's great.
I was going to ask if he consumed any alcohol before he came to this meeting. You know what? These jobs, as Deputy Mayor Menon-Wong, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Carroll, Mr. Oliphant will tell you, the most rewarding part of them is when you can come to a meeting like this, learn something, then go back to your office and have a meeting and actually sort of find that you saved 6 trees or you made 7 people happier. You do learn pretty quickly that you can't make everybody happy no matter what it is you're doing or what the issue is, but if you can make more people happy, save some trees, whatever it is you're doing, it's well worth the hours you put into it. And these things are hugely important learning experiences because you learn about things people are getting up and asking about. That's why I enjoy doing them, and I'll continue to do them. And I do it on other television stations and radio stations too. In fact, I'm on News Talk 1010 tomorrow doing the same thing on radio. It just helps you. You learn by what people are asking about. It's very good. So thank you for being here, and thank you for that comment.
Thanks very much. And I know we mentioned TTC fare hikes earlier. We talked about that. Royson, you may have...
yeah, I'm just wondering if we have enough money now that you increased fares by another 10 cents. TTC, they're okay now? Everything,
well, no,
everything is solved?
the way it's left, without getting into a dizzying array of numbers, is if you implemented the fare increase that was approved by the Commission yesterday, it would still leave the need for the city government to subsidize the TTC by an additional $41 million. Am I right, Denzel? $41 million. And that sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but we're talking about $1 billion organization here. But if we wanted to both enhance service, so something that I fought very hard for, which is to have the subways start to open earlier on Sundays, and it's a first step to have it open 1 hour earlier, those things cost money. And so if we want to have those service enhancements and the new express buses and all the rest, they would need to have the fare increase plus an extra $41 million, which can only come from property and commercial taxes and land transfer taxes and whatnot. So that's what the budget process will now have to look at, is that $41 million to be made available to finance all those things. And I'm optimistic.
You're supporting that?
Yes, I am. Because, as I said earlier, I can't enhance services and improve them and restore them last year, and then this year say, can't you take a joke, we're cutting them out again. So yes, I'm supportive of that. I mean, I won't say to the dollar, but I'll say yes, more or less.
Why can't we go to a water plan for transit?
Which plan?
Water. I mean, over the last, we went 9 years increasing the water rate by 9%, right? And then we're going 8 and 8, and then 5 and 5 and 3, 3, 3. So you're talking about over like 16, 17 years of increases that are set going up on the water rate. And that's because we got a problem with the water infrastructure. Everyone knows we have a problem with the transit infrastructure. So why can't we just bite the bullet and say, over the next 16 years, you're going to go 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 8, 8, 8, 8, 5, 5, 5, and our transit.
Well, I'll come part way to agreeing with you in that yesterday I said, and it's not the first time I've said it since I've been the mayor, that I think people should count on seeing a transit fare increase every year because of the first factor I mentioned tonight when you asked about it, which was inflation. That I think when we get into trouble with these businesses is politicians, and I will confess, and I did confess, and I sort of apologized for the fact that during the election I said I would freeze fares, and when I got to the mayor's office, saw the need to reinvest in the TDC, I unfortunately had to go back on it. The real problem isn't so much that I had to go back on the promise, I never should have made it in the first place. And I'm free to admit that, I'm being honest about that. I have said in the spirit of the same honesty that I believe going forward we should have people expect there will be a transit fare increase every year. I think if you do it that way, you can make it modest, but nonetheless there will be an increase. So I think people should expect that. That's the proper way to do business, I think.
Okay, thanks so much. Sorry to cut you off. We have a minute left in the show, and we have one gentleman at the mic.
My question is very short. Yes. Mr. Mayor, your smart track, it's your favorite subject. Most of us take the subway, we take a bus to Lawrence Avenue at rush hour, we're going to have pushers push us on the trains. When you put your smart track through, are you thinking of putting a downtown relief line to take the pressure off Yonge Street?
Sir, this is a downtown relief line. Let me explain why, and I know we have a minute left. When people get on at one of the stations in Scarborough, right now those people in Scarborough take a bus and go westbound to the Yonge Street subway and go south. And they're on the trains you're being pushed on, or trying to get pushed on. If they can take a smart track train straight downtown to Union Station from getting on at, say, Finch or Agincourt, they will not come over to the Yonge Street subway. If they can get on and go downtown from even somewhere further south in Scarborough, they won't go along Bloor Street and go to Bloor and Yonge, which is terribly crowded. Smart Track on the east and on the west, and the ridership studies will prove this, will take people off the Yonge Street subway and give them an alternate way to get downtown. That's one of the reasons I support it so strongly, in addition to supplying additional transit to these outlying areas of the city and connecting people to jobs. It will run all the way from Mississauga through Union Station downtown and out to Markham and connect people to jobs. And so it will provide relief for the Yonge Street subway.
Existing rail lines.
Pardon me?
Some of the existing rail lines.
It's mostly on existing rail lines, sir.
Okay,
That's one of the other reasons it can be done quickly. Got to go.
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you so much for everyone's questions tonight. I really do appreciate it. We're almost done. I don't know if you've watched the show before. This is the end of the question and answer period for now, but we'd like to end it on a light note. It's a little fun quiz that we have.
At our expense.
And it's
right?
at your expense. So I'm going to say I'm the game show
You're the
host
quiz
this
master.
time, yeah, and it's between you two. It's called, don't be offended, the idiot test.
Okay.
Okay? Now I'm going to ask a series of questions. I'm going to ask both of you the same question. I want you to quickly answer, and I'll tell you if you're right or not, and at the end we'll give you a little bit of a tally. Royson's sweating a little bit, but you look pretty calm, Mayor Tory. Okay, ready? First question. How many months have 28 days?
One. Well, one except in leap year.
And? All.
Oh, for goodness
Sorry.
sake.
I heard someone say it out there. You're right. All. Okay,
Thanks for
second
the help.
question. Second question. On a farm, there's a field. 50 cows, 28 chickens. How many didn't? 50 cows on a field, 28 chickens. How many didn't?
I'm afraid to ask how many didn't what.
All right, that's it. 30. 30 didn't. 50 cows, 28 chickens. 30 didn't. All right. Don't groan. All right. You're running a marathon and you just passed the person in second place. What place are you in?
It depends which way you're going.
You're running a marathon and you just passed the person in second place. What place are you in now?
Second place.
Yes, you're right. Boom, got it. Second place. All right, you have two coins. You have two coins that equal 15 cents, but one of them is not a nickel. How is that possible?
Two coins, 15 cents, one is not a nickel.
Yeah. Huh?
One of them is a U.S. dime. At least
Inflation, exchange. One is a dime, which is not a nickel, right?
Yes.
Right,
Okay.
there you go. That's the answer. Last one, okay. Johnny's mother had 3 children. The first child is named April. The second child is named May. What's the third child's name? Quick.
Who's again? Johnny's mother?
Johnny's mother had 3 children. First child is named April.
The third one's named Johnny.
Yeah, very good, very good. I didn't get that one.
That's pretty good.
Very
I'm
good.
not just another pretty face here, folks. I mean, come on.
I can throw in another one. Does England have a 4th of July?
Well, of course it does.
Because yes, everyone does. It's just a day. All right, just checking. Okay, how many birthdays does the average man have? Royson? How many birthdays does the average man have?
1.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Well, now
good.
why is that true?
December 15th.
You only have one birthday.
No, you have your birth. Okay, it's the anniversary of your birthday.
Right, you only have one. Why can't a man living in the USA be buried in Canada?
Because he's alive.
That's All right, thanks so much for joining us, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for your humor. And that ends this edition of Ask the Mayor. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well done.